Many people associate Renaissance painting with a massive increase in realism. There is some truth in this, though of course it depends on what you think is real and what unreal. 15th century painters made this change by adopting perspective as the means by which they depicted the world around them. Raphael's Marriage of the Virgin from 1504 is a good example of this. The perspective grid, with its central vanishing point, which was used to plot the image, is more or less visible in the final painting, in the squares of the piazza where the marriage takes place. By means of these squares you could, if you wished, pretty much measure every object in the painting and the distance between them. We can see how far away the wedding party is from the temple because every distance in the painting is handled consistently. This had not always been the case. Giotto's painting from a couple of centuries earlier shows a quite different approach. We know that St. Francis is standing in front of the church on the left, but it's difficult to say exactly how far in front of the church. When I look at his foot, he seems to be standing right next to it, but when I look at his head, he seems to be some distance away from the building. Distances fluctuate in Giotto's painting, whereas in Raphael they are fixed. Adopting perspective enabled artists to establish spatial relationships with great precision, but it came at a cost. When you look at Giotto's painting, it is immediately obvious that St. Francis is the most important figure because he is bigger than everybody else. Raphael cannot just increase Mary's size, so he has to find different ways to draw the viewer's attention to her. Symmetry helps. Mary is just to the left of the central axis. Also, the off-white robe of the woman behind her helps the figure of Mary to stand out a little more than the figure of her husband Joseph. An unsuccessful suitor who breaks his stick across his knee just in front of Joseph draws him slightly back into the group, while Mary is a little more detached. The perspective system works best with concrete objects, people, buildings, sticks and stones, but it can make it hard for a painter to represent abstract ideas like holiness or love. Different artists dealt with this problem in different ways. Piero della Francesca was a 15th century painter interested in perspective and in abstract ideas. During his lifetime, he was probably as famous as a mathematician, someone who fully understood the geometry of perspective, as he was as a painter. He uses perspective knowingly in his paintings, pushing at the limits of the system to see what kind of things he can make visible. During the course of the 15th century, halos became problematic for painters because a halo isn't a concrete thing. In earlier centuries, halos were elaborate and emphatic, a large disc covered in gold leaf and often embossed while the rest of the painting was flat. The bigger the halo, the holier the saint. Halos were often shown parallel to the surface of the painting, regardless of the angle of the head. Perspective encouraged artists to think of the halo as a disc floating above the saint's head. This could then be rendered in perspective, and because it amplified the tilt of the head, it actually helped explain spatial relationships more clearly. Halos didn't disappear, but they became much less obtrusive. There are still two halos above the heads of Mary and Joseph in Raphael's painting, but they are faint rings, almost impossible to see in reproduction. In Piero's painting, all three figures have halos. They are imagined as solid gold discs floating above each head. They are shiny and reflective. You can see a portion of grid reflected in each of them, which is presumably the floor on which they stand. Curiously though, there is no reflection of the figure's head in the halo. While the reality, the concreteness of the halo has been increased, the concreteness of the figures has been ever so slightly diminished. This is not the only bit of unreality in Piero's painting. The poses of the two angels echo one another and preserve the strong sense of symmetry. But it is not just their pose. The folds of their robes are an exact reflection of one another. This is a thing that could not happen in a world ordered like our own. And my guess is that Piero does it to make the viewer aware of the presence of the divine. Within this recognisably concrete world, something so extraordinary is happening. A human woman is going to give birth to a god, that it overturns our experience of the world. The impossible is now possible, and the proof, as it were, is the existence of these mirrored angels. The appearance of an exact double sends a shudder through our sense of reality. This is as true today as it was in the 15th century. Vija Celmins made a series of works where she presents a stone and its exact double, cast in bronze or resin and meticulously painted by the artist. It is impossible, just by looking at them, to tell the actual stone from its representation. This produces a kind of vertigo, since, if I can't distinguish real from fake here, how can I be sure of the reality of all the other stones I see? I believe that they are real, but looking at Celmins' work, I have to admit that I don't actually know. The dogged pursuit of realism, in the end, turns into its opposite, the announcement of a dimension beyond everyday experience. Interestingly, this is not all that Celmins' work does. Alongside the large philosophical cosmic questions that it raises, it also brings us back to this particular stone. The stone is the most ordinary object imaginable, but the work reminds us of the mystery that inheres in each one. Looking at them makes me aware of how little I actually know about stones. It reminds us that looked at properly, even a stone has the capacity to surprise. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe.